Okay, so do this with me now. Lay out your pants to where we can see the inseam going all the way through, and this is with the wrong side up. Now we can take these inseams and put them together down here at the ankles. And you're going to see all along this crotch seam here, there's lots of tension. And what we need to do is we need to clip the curves of the seam allowance. Now keep in mind, once we come in here and start clipping the curve, it's going to be really difficult to do a fitting and release some of this. So when I clip the curve, I'm just going to do these clips that are only 1/4 of an inch deep. So for instance, here's the crotch curve from the front. I'm going to just put a few little clips in here and no deeper than 1/4 of an inch, just in case I want to release some of this fabric later during the fitting. And then I'll do the same thing over here. This is the crotch curve of center back. And once you get to the straight part of center back, you can stop clipping. Now to double check, you can hold center fronts at the zip stop and center back all the way at the top, and make sure that you can hold that thread straight the whole way, and you know you've done a good job of releasing all that tension. Now what we need is these fronts. If you've unpinned your pockets, we want to pin these back in place so they're not going to get in your way. So just take a minute to flatten them out and put a pin through there. Take a look here at the back of your pants, and this is that yoke panel. Something that we should have done actually a little while ago was to stay stitch all along this yoke panel from side seam to side seam to make sure it doesn't stretch out or lose its shape. So now I have my stay stitch going all the way across the top of the yoke panels. Keep in mind that this stay stitch is something that normally we would have done a long time ago. Back before we even sewed these pieces together, I would have stay stitched the pattern pieces. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to line up the side seams. You're going to want to make sure you're matching your notches here at the side seam. And then also moving down towards the knee level. And then of course matching the raw edges all the way down to the ankles. Now coming all the way back up here to the top, you want to make sure you're matching this notch where all those pockets are lining up together. Now when we did this flat fill stitching here, the 3/4 inch seam allowance and everything, the top edges might be slightly uneven. That's okay. But keep in mind that the shaping is a little bit different for the side seam of the back and the side seam of the front. And that's due to when we're doing the volume here for the pockets. So just make sure that you're coming up here and you're matching the same side seam shaping of the raw edges. And again, if the top edges are slightly off, it's okay. Just make sure you're keeping the raw edge of the side seams matching the whole way, and this notch right here. Alright, so let's get the other side as well. Alright, so start here with a back tack at the ankle and sew exactly along your 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way and do a back tack here at the top, putting the two side seams of the back and the front right sides together. Now that you've sewn your side seams, just come back to your pattern piece one last time and line it up here at the knee level, and just double check down to the ankles that the seam line underneath is exactly what your pencil line is on top. And then I'm going to hold this down here at the knee level, and I'm coming back up here into the waist area. And I can see my other notch right here. And again, I'm just making sure that the seam line that I sewed on the sewing machine matches with my pencil line. If anything is a little bit weird or wobbly, just take that part out and re-sew it. But everything else that's good to go, you could just leave it in place. So go ahead and also check the other side seam from the other leg and just make sure everything on it is perfect. Okay, take out your store-bought pants and let's look here at the side seam. So basically what they've done is they've sewn the side seam closed, they overlocked it, and then because all of this pocket has a lot of thickness in here, what they've done is they've pressed the seam allowances towards the back leg. And you can see up in this area also, they've even thrown a top stitch to hold all of those layers nice and flat, pressed towards the back. So you can see here on the inside that all of the seam allowances are pressing towards the back. While my pants are still inside out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently finger press the seam allowances of the side seam towards the back. And we'll do that for both legs. And at this stage now we're ready to turn these right side out. And I want to do this as gently as possible so I don't get a ton of wrinkles on my pant legs. And now here from the right side out, we can come back into the side seams and let's continue finger pressing the side seam allowances towards the back. Make sure you're getting down to every single last thread on here. Alright, so get your iron on hot, make sure it's full of water. And we're going to do a final press on this and we're going to get ready to do a fitting. What I want you to do is follow along closely with what I'm doing here. So I have one of the legs with the side seam on top of the inseam. I'm also making sure that the side seam allowance is pressed towards the front and the inseam seam allowance is pressed towards the back. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to steam and press just right along the seams right here, about up to the knee area. And absolutely make sure you do not press a crease in these pants because this is not trousers, these are jeans, so they should just be round all the way. And then to make sure I didn't put a crease on the front, I can fold this to where the seam allowance and the inseams are to the outsides. And I can come along the front here and just make sure there's no crease on it whatsoever. Alright, and then let's do the same thing for the other leg. Now if you have any wrinkles up here in the thigh area above the knee, you can slide this to where the knee is hanging off. And I have my side seam is here and my inseam is there. And I can come in here and I can just press just on the flat part of the body without putting any creases anywhere else. And then I'll do the same thing for the other leg. Now that I've pressed my side seams and inseams, especially down here in the ankle area, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a 1-inch stay stitch all the way around, and that lets me know where I think the ankle is on my client, and I can check that when we do the fitting. So now I've put a stay stitch on my ankle. Remember that down there it's a 1-inch seam allowance to match back to what I think is her ankle. Once you've thrown the stay stitch in there, also down here at the ankle, your muslin wants to fall apart really easily, so go ahead and just pull any of those loose threads out until they stop falling apart. And then we'll make sure to trim all the stuff away, so then when you do a fitting with your fit model, she's not tripping on her pants. Now, when you do a fitting back with your fit model, you know how a lot of times when you put your jeans on and you kind of pull it up in the back? If you don't have the waistband on here during a fitting, your client's going to keep pulling these up their back, and it's not going to be the correct fit. So we definitely have to have the waistband in here, at least on the back panel and going across the side seam towards the front panel. And then that way we can get a more accurate fitting. Also, you're going to want to make sure that the waistband itself is covering up the top of their favorite underwear that they wear with jeans. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to take out our waistband, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew these up and get ready to do a fitting back with our client. Okay, so taking out your waistbands, for me I'm going to demo doing the contour waistband. What I need to do is I need to sew center back for both of these, and I want them right sides together. So I can see here's my pencil line for the grain. I'm going to put the pencil lines right sides together, and then I'm going to sew this up here at center back. Alright, so sew at center back, back tack at the top and the bottom, and then you're going to want to butterfly press this open, and do this for both of your waistbands. Now once you've butterfly pressed both of them open, one of your waistbands stay stitch at exactly 1/2 inch all the way across, and this is along the bottom edge of your waistband. This is where it's going to sew to the main body of your pants. For the other waistband, we're going to just overlock this raw edge here along the bottom. For this second one here where we put the overlock stitch, if you don't have an overlock machine, you can simply just put a stay stitch about 1/4 inch all along that edge, just to make sure it doesn't stretch out or fall apart. Now normally what we would do is we would sew the top edges of the waistbands together and finish the top edge. But for the first fitting, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to use one layer of waistband during the first fitting. But I want to make sure that this top edge does not stretch out. So the waistband where we put a stay stitch on there, what we're going to do is we're going to also stay stitch all along this top edge. What I'm going to do is, just to remind myself, I'm going to chalk 1/4 inch seam allowance here at the top edge, so when I go over to the machine I don't accidentally sew this at 1/2 inch. When you sew the top edge, there's no back tack at the beginning or the end, and also be really sure that as you're sewing you're not stretching and pulling on this pattern piece. You want it to maintain the exact same size and shape. And what I want to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to line up the center back from my pattern piece with this new seam at center back. And I just want to double check that I did not stretch this waistband at all. If it is a little bit stretched, then because we did not do a back tack here, you can always pull a little bit on your threads and shrink this back down and steam it and press it until you have the exact pattern shape that you did on paper. Alright, now let's attach this single layer to our pants. Okay, so make sure your pants are inside out. So once we look inside of the pants, this is the right side up. We're going to take our waistband, and this is the bottom edge, the bottom curve of the waistband. And we're going to match up center back. Now if you're doing the straight waistband, you'll do the same thing, you'll just match up center back, it just won't have a curve to it. And what we're going to do is, this waistband is going to sew all the way back to the side seam, and we also want to go another inch into the pocket beyond the side seam going towards center front. Now for me, I don't normally pin something all the way along. I just sew it on the machine and make sure I'm hitting my notches. But in this instance, it's really important to me that everything is extremely accurate all the way back to exactly what the pattern piece is doing. Now when I get up here to the side seam, I have this little tiny notch for the side seam. And I'm pinning it, also making sure that I'm keeping the seam allowances from the front pockets all pressed towards the back. So I'm pinning the seam allowance and I'm lining up the notch for the side seam. Remember that this notch right here lines up literally with the seam itself. And then we still want to go 1 more inch towards the front. So this pin will be my starting point. And then I'm going to continue pinning on all the way back to the other side. Now this is my pair of jeans when I did this demonstration on the size 4 dress form. And in this instance I did the straight waistband. You can see here on this waistband it doesn't even have a center back because it's just a straight line the full distance. Now what you would do is if you're following along doing a straight waistband because you want to also wear this with belt loops and a belt, you'll do the same thing where you'll sew 1 layer of the waistband to the main body, and you'll want to start here at the pocket, go through the side seam, all the way past center back to the other pocket and 1 inch beyond the side seam. And then we can do the fitting, and later on we'll finish sewing the waistband. Again, so you're going to sew 1 layer of the waistband starting at 1 inch beyond the pocket going towards the front with a back tack, and then sew exactly at your 1/2 inch all the way through to the other side seam, and then going beyond that a good inch and end with a back tack here as well. So let's go ahead and press the seam allowances towards the waistband. Alright, so let's get these pants turned right side out, and we're going to do a final press, and we're going to get ready for our fit model to come and do a fitting. Now taking out your ham, let's come over here and we're going to work on the center back of our jeans. We'll put our hammer underneath here. Remember that center back and this yoke and the waistband is all on a curve, and make sure your seam allowances are pressed towards the wearer's left side. Now here I would like to get this back pocket nice and crisp, so I'm going to position the ham to where the back pocket's right there. And I'm making sure that none of the pants is getting wrinkled here underneath. And I can get this back pocket one last time. And then I want to continue getting the waistband area as well as this yoke curve. Remember, we have all this shaping here because we use the yoke to make the darts disappear. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other back panel. Now let's turn these pants over, and what we're going to do is I want to work on pressing this front pocket as well as getting the side seam. But I need to be really careful that all of this back that I just pressed, I'm not crushing it. So here I can get the side seam and the beginning of my pocket, as well as finishing the waistband up here. And then I'll just move this over so I can get a little more further towards center front. And at this point the waistband is not attached. We're going to do that later, so you can just move it out of your way. Now so far these pockets are also not attached in this area. We're going to do that after we do our fitting. I have a pin down here that's holding these layers together. I want to pull this pin out so it doesn't stab my client. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this pin here from the front at the grain line. So as she's pulling her pants on, this bag layer underneath here, the bag liners, they're not going to get all crunched up. And then I'll just warn her as she's putting her pants on that there's a little pin holding this at the front. Now, of course, it all depends on your client. You could also do this using a safety pin, and that way nobody's going to get poked. So it's up to you. It just depends on your client, your fit model, if they're familiar with having pins in clothes while they're trying it on. Or if you're doing this for like a teenager or something, maybe you'll use a safety pin just so they don't get poked. Basically how I have it is the tip part of the pin is here in between layers, so nothing is showing on the underside where her skin is. Alright, so I'm going to come over here and I'm also going to finish getting the side seam of the other side. And again, I want to make sure that I'm not crushing any of the work that I just did on pressing the back panels. Now the last thing I'll do is I want to get the center front, so I'm going to put my ham directly on top of center back, and we can get the right side of the pants nice and flat, and I'll bring the left side over the top, remembering that the left side is the center front that we already creased. So I'm going to lay that right on top and press that as well. Alright, so at this stage we're ready now to do a fitting with our client. You're going to want to have them hang out for probably 2 hours, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a fitting at the stage that your pants are right now. And then you still need to determine the fit at the front, and then you want to finish sewing the waistband in and do another fitting with your client. And then after that, whatever changes we do here to the front, I'll show you how to translate that back to your pattern pieces. And then also we'll talk about the ankles, having the ankle finished, and then turning the ankles into a straight line. Alright, so ready to do a fitting. Make sure your client shows up. She's prepared to hang out for at least 2 hours. And also make sure she's wearing whatever underwear she would normally wear when she's wearing a pair of jeans.